singing, riddle and temple, hill of father speaks, and they declare.
This evening, I'm going to speak on one of the topics that I'd sent ahead that's kind of been advertised. It's called Just Bring Them Up, taken from the passage in Ephesians chapter 6 and in verse 4. The Apostle Paul is dealing with a lot of different circumstances, a lot of different things within our lives that he's guiding the Ephesian brethren with, and he did similar things, similar letter to the Colossian brethren as well. But in dealing with the family, he said, "And you fathers, do not provoke your children to wrath, but bring them up in the training and admonition of the Lord." So we want to consider that idea about bringing them up. And quite literally, that word means, or the passage means there, to rear up to maturity. So that's something very important. And we want to consider maybe a little bit, when do you start that? In what degree do you guide them or bring them to maturity? Now, there's a lot of young people. There's some young families. There's some of us old folks too. But we all have a part in helping the young come along. I can remember when I was just a boy, there were those within the church down in San Antonio that were not blood relatives, but helped me tremendously. There were those that taught me things to do. There were those that corrected me. And I can remember there were times I didn't appreciate it. There were times that they told me or warned me about things, and I did think, well, that's not true. That's not going to happen. And you know, they were right. The older people were right, because they could see things that I couldn't see. And that's something to remember if you're young. I know how we can think when we're young and how confident we can be in what we're convinced is right. But really consider it if an older brother or sister, or especially your parents, say that's not the right way to go. Because you've got to remember, the older ones have already been through that area and they have more experience. But let's get back and consider the Scriptures. I'd like for us to look back into the Old Testament and see some of the instructions that was given through Moses concerning rearing the children, or the way they were to be taught. In Deuteronomy chapter 6, there's a passage there that is very good, and it shows us the kind of circumstances that we can use in not just teaching our children, but you can use it in teaching a lot of people if you want to bring in spiritual things just in day-to-day life. But Deuteronomy chapter 6, beginning in verse 4. Deuteronomy 6, verse 4. "Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your strength. And these words which I command to you today shall be in your heart." Beginning in verse 7 now. "You shall teach them diligently to your children, and shall talk of them when you sit in your house, when you walk by the way, when you lie down, and when you rise up. You shall bind them as a sign on your hand, and they shall be as frontlets between your eyes. You shall write them on the doorpost of your house and on your gates." So Moses is showing how important the instructions from God are to be. And he's speaking to Israel, those who are already old enough and mature enough to listen, to learn, and to apply. But then he points out, you shall teach these things to your children. So he's getting their attention. And in getting it to begin with, he does say here. Now, it wasn't too long ago, just the other day, my son Benjamin made a comment about hearing. If that was one phrase he at least audibly heard many times, was, "Did you hear what I said?" I know he heard it audibly, but he didn't hear it with understanding or with acceptance. And we all know there's a big difference between the two. You can hear a lot of things audibly, but not hear it intellectually, to then take it in and to do it. And he was remembering. So I know gradually it did penetrate, because now he uses it to students. But that's what he's writing here to Israel. He says, hear intellectually. Give consent. Know what you're listening to. And too many times today within this society, and it's always been true, man really hadn't changed from then till now. But people have their own ideas. They'll hear something no matter what the source. They can hear things from God, and yet it might conflict with their own ideas, and they just kick it out, keep their own. So Moses is saying, you listen with understanding and accept what I am telling you. So first he had to get the teachers, the parents' attention. You listen to this and remember these things. So we need to take God seriously and don't take God casually, like he's giving a list of suggestions. He's giving commandments. He's giving instructions and not just a list of multiple choice. So we see what it is that we're supposed to be doing. We see what Moses is saying here, that the adults were to take charge and lead so that the young would learn. The children weren't on their own. He didn't say you let the kids grow up and just kind of see how they feel about life and see what direction they want to go. No, he said you teach them at every single opportunity and guide them toward God. It's just last winter, I was in our grocery store in the thriving metropolis of Goshen, Ohio, and is in the winter, and there was a young lady coming in with about, maybe the baby was just over a year old in just what looked like pajamas, and it gets cold. It was cold. And someone said something about her baby only having on these thin little clothes, and she says, I cannot make her wear a coat. And I thought, what? I thought, lady, you're 10 to 15 times bigger than that little baby, and you can't make her wear a coat? That's what she said. Couldn't make her wear a coat. So you know there's a problem. And if they couldn't control, say, a 1-year-old, 14-month-old, what was going to happen when that child was 12 or 18 or go on up? Like one person said in an article that was just entitled, Parents Today Aren't Strict Enough. They said undisciplined toddlers become obnoxious children who grow into spoiled teenagers and entitled adults. We've seen that. And no, she wasn't raising the child. She was allowing a child just to grow up, just to get older. But Moses was writing here in Deuteronomy, in this repetition of the law. In verse 7, he says, you shall teach them diligently. So you start at the very beginning. You shall teach them diligently. And this is to the point. He means intensively. You teach them with strength. You teach them with force. You shall teach your children diligently. And he shows all these different opportunities that you have. He says, when you sit down in the house, when you're walking by the way, when you get up, when you lay down, says there's always opportunities to teach. There's always some kind of comparisons to make. And that's what Jesus did. He said, consider the lilies. They could look, they saw the flowers. And they understood, no, we didn't know Solomon, but you say, even Solomon wasn't arrayed like these. He said, consider the birds. You're worried about your day-to-day life. He said, God takes care. He has a way for the birds to have food. They don't farm. They don't do anything like that, but he cares for them. What are you worried about? Don't you think he'll care for you? Aren't you better than a bird? And people say, I see that. He was using the same opportunities that we have every day with children, not just with children, maybe with our co-workers. I know some are in construction. You can say, the Lord was a carpenter. The Lord built his church. You start off the same kind of teaching. But here he's emphasizing the ways. He says, with your children, there are opportunities, and you must use it. Point them in the right way, because one thing for sure, if we don't point or aim our children, the world will. The world will. And Moses is showing And of course, we know that as well. It's our place. So he says, teach them when you sit, walk, lie down, rise up. Teach them in all these ways. In chapter 11 of Deuteronomy, verse 18 and 19, he says, therefore you shall lay up words of mine in your heart, in your soul, and bind them as a sign on your hand, and they shall be as frontlets between your eyes. You shall teach them to your children, speaking of them when you sit in your house, when you walk by the way, when you lie down, and when you rise up. Moses says it must be a part of your life. When he talks about it being bound to your hand, he didn't mean that they had to tie a box on there with Scripture or had to tie some kind of box on their forehead like the Pharisees did later on. He said, make it guide everything that you do. That's what we do things with our hands. Let it guide you for the things that you see and where you go. It has to be part of your mind. So if it is part of ours, he says, then you shall teach your children. So if such in-depth details were given to the children of Israel concerning the old law, how much more attention should we be giving to the perfect law of liberty, the law of Christ, to our most prized possessions, our children? We need to be doing it too. What will do or have we emphasized as our children grow up? Are we taking the lead as the spiritual guides, or are children allowed to direct themselves? And sometimes are the children allowed to direct the parents? I'm sure we've seen that too. Sometimes it is the child who's in charge, and the parents are the ones being led or being guided. But remember, many people, even those who are very active with their reading and with their studying, still many people learn very well by observation. Much more than other ways, but still through sight, through example that they see. And our children certainly do. You know, it's a hard lesson when you see something in your children, you wonder, where'd you get that idea? And then you remember, I know where they got it. A lot of times, if we see something negative, see something that we don't like in our children, if we really start doing a self-inventory, we can find out where they got it. Sometimes it is us. So we do need to take care of the source first, and then be guiding our children in the way that they ought to go. So the law of Moses was very important, and we see what they were to do. Lay these words in your heart and in your soul. The law of Moses was not just a physical law, but even then they're taught to love the Lord their God with all their heart, soul, and body. It was the inward part. Bind them onto your hands and in your eyes, before your mind. Write them on the doorpost of your house. It is to guide and support our homes. We don't have to carve it into the door. You can. But we know what he meant. It is to be the most important thing within the guidance of our house. There are some articles written, might say articles from a foundation of faith type, and people were talking about keeping the church important to their children. And they said things like, parents must be the primary evangelizers of their children. It says, for our children to accept and be nourished by the teachings of the church, we must be involved directly in teaching the faith to our children. And when we think about that, that's true. We can't expect someone else to be doing it. We must be the ones that are involved. It says often religious books have been reduced to a kind of religious psychology, focusing on how our children feel about their faith rather than teaching them what it really is. That's true. We need to learn what the faith is rather than just what I think or feel about it. But I need to learn the truth. It went on to say today's secular culture, which teaches us from the youth that devotion to God is a private matter, makes this difficult to see. If we keep it so private that we hide it and no one knows anything about it, we can't be teaching or guiding them. says our society makes us ashamed not only to speak about God in our workplace or to our neighbors, we even hesitate to show a vibrant faith to our own children. It says as a result, we rely too much on Sunday services or programs to teach our children. So parents are trying to pass on the faith to their, as parents to try to pass on the faith to the children, we suggest that most of all, they try to incorporate the faith into their daily life. And isn't that true? Our children will learn much more from what they see and they hear every day at home than just a service once or thrice a week. So it needs to be real, a way of life, and not just an occasional practice or something that is part-time. But often, as they even pointed out, said, of course, in order to evangelize our children, we must first develop our own personal religious life. You can't give what you don't have. Makes sense, too. If we don't have a strong faith in Christ, we can't teach it, we can't pass it on. They said the world sometimes, even brethren, will not support our efforts to raise children in the faith. Have you ever been trying real hard with your kids, your parents, and then a brother or sister in Christ comes along and says, you know, you're really too hard on them. You need to give them a little more slack. Let them do more things with their friends or whatever. You're trying to keep them focused on the truth and salvation. And then they say, no, just ease up on them a little bit. That's disappointing. And it doesn't help us in rearing our children. So be careful sometime, maybe even with the counsel we might give someone else when we think they're being too strict in teaching Christ. Well, we need to be careful. Emphasize Christ at all times. One person wrote, we rarely skip a Sunday service. Said, I think going every Sunday, whether we feel like it or not, whether we have time or not, has taught our kids the importance of it. They never complain about going to church. They don't consider that not going is an option. Good. Sometimes say, well, we made a commitment over there to something else, extracurricular. And they forget about the commitment here. And if we start letting our children keep commitments out there that have nothing to do with Christ, how will they start keeping a commitment to Christ? No, it shouldn't be considered as an option. One last little thing. This person said, one says, attending the services sometimes meant being late for or even missing a sports event or a rehearsal. But it sent a clear message that worshiping together is a priority. And it ought to be. It ought to be. I know of a man with boys in sports, and they were good. But it was made clear at the very beginning, he spoke to the coach and said there doesn't need to be a problem because they don't have to play. But they're not going to miss the worship. And it was fine. It was just clear up front. The father could show up on the field and they just hollered out the boys' names no matter what was going on. They ran off. Everything was fine. But it's clear up front. But I know it doesn't always work that way. But we need to put a priority down and set it straight in the very beginning. We need to teach our children in the very beginning how attending the worship of the church or serving Christ is something that we get to do. Not something, oh, I have to do it. Makes a big difference, doesn't it? When we tell our friends and neighbors what we are blessed to be able to do, rather than, no, I'm sorry I have to miss that because I have to go to worship. I have to go to a meeting. Our kids hear that, and they'd pick up on the same thing. Well, all those things that we read, that was something even from a Catholic article that they were teaching concerning keeping their children within the Catholic faith. If they recognize that, we certainly need to recognize it as well. The Lord's church is to be put first. Psalms 122 and verse 1. David said, I was glad when they said to me, let's go to the house of the Lord. He said, I was glad. It wasn't, okay, I don't have anything else to do. Or, like if my wife asked me to the mall, if you want to, but I don't. That's not the way to be. I like the way the NIV has Psalm 122. It says, I rejoiced when those said to me, let us go to the house of the Lord. Something much more active. I was rejoicing. I was gleesome that I can go worship the Lord. At times, some just don't seem very happy to be here. And we know how that is. Sometimes we may not feel very well, but still, we can see and we can recognize what we need to be doing. As with Deuteronomy chapter 6, we need to create times of teaching for our children. We need to create times of instruction so that it's something that they expect and they get the relationship all the way through. And that's something that God did or had the people do many times in the Old Testament. In Joshua chapter 4 and in verse 5, the people were getting to go into the promised land. And it says, and Joshua said to them, cross over before the ark of the Lord your God in the midst of the Jordan, and each one of you take up a stone on his shoulder, according to the number of the tribes of the children of Israel, that this may be a sign among you when your children ask in times to come, saying, what do these stones mean? They need to see something. There needs to be something that brings curiosity and a question. What does this mean? And he said so they would see this. And then they would recognize that it has some kind of significance. But what is the significance? Beginning in verse 20 in Joshua 4. It says, and those 12 stones which they took out of the Jordan, Joshua set up in Gilgal. And he spoke to the children of Israel, saying, when your children ask their fathers in time to come, saying, what are these stones? Then you shall let your children know, saying, Israel crossed over this Jordan on dry land. For the Lord your God dried up the waters of the Jordan before you, until you had crossed over, as the Lord your God did to the Red Sea, which he dried up before us until we had crossed over. That all the people of the earth may know the hand of the Lord, and that it is mighty, and that you may fear the Lord your God forever. So in some ways, in our life, do we have piles of rocks? Are there things that our children or others can see? What does this mean? What significance is that? And then we get the chance to tell them. You ladies have an advantage to that in many ways. From modest appearance compared to the majority of the world, to the way that you wear your hair, according to 1 Corinthians chapter 11. And people are always asking you. I know in our little small area, sometimes the people don't ask the ladies themselves, but they know my association with the church, and they ask me about them. And you know, most of the time, I pull out a piece of paper or my little Bible, or I'll write it down and I'll say, read that. And even when, or even though they usually don't agree with the practice, they'll read it and say, wow, now I see, I understand. Doesn't mean to start doing it. But they can read it in the Word itself, and they can understand it. So that's just a small pile of rocks. But we can teach our other children. We can have things in our lives. We can have these practices. We can have all these things that bring up the questions. And we're able to teach. Not just our children, but others as well. But back in Ephesians 6, you know, Paul did say, bring them up. He did not say, let them make their own choice. He did not say, it's your children's lives. Let them experience things. Let them go out and find their own way. Figure out who they are. Never said that. Like back in Deuteronomy, it says, here it is, teach it to them. Here in Ephesians, he says, bring them up. Teach them in this way. this is what you must do. The bring them up is a phrase that's a present active imperative. What does that mean? It's a command that just keeps on going. It just keeps on going. That you just keep on bringing them up. No, you don't give up. You don't quit. You keep on bringing them along in the way that you need them to go. Proverbs 22, verse 6, we know that little proverb. Train up a child in the way he should go, and when he is old, he will not depart from it. And like all proverbs, they are general truths. There can be some exceptions to it. And we've seen exceptions to this, just like the next one, Proverbs 29 and verse 15. The rod and rebuke gives wisdom, but a child left to himself brings shame to his mother. There are times that a child is left to themselves, but they turn out a very strong Christian in spite of their upbringing. So there can be exceptions to each one of those proverbs. But yes, the majority of the time, this is the way it goes. But it does show us, it does mean that we are to initiate, we are to dedicate, and we are to discipline the child in the right direction. That's what this bring up is referring to. Like Eli, Samuel, and Hannah. All of these were working together to bring Samuel along. Hannah made the decision long ago to devote Samuel's life to the service of God. She said in 1 Samuel 1, verse 27 and 28, she said, "For this child I prayed, and the Lord has granted me my petition which I asked of him. Therefore, I also have lent him to the Lord. As long as he lives, he shall be lent to the Lord." Hannah decided, as soon as she knew she was having a child, he's going to belong to God and serve him. Today, people would think that'd be a type of child abuse. Oh, you need to let that child decide for himself. They're letting very small children decide their own genders before they're even 10 years old, instead of showing them, telling them who and what they are. I understand on the national average, even college freshmen change their minds or change their majors 7 times on the national average. Is there anything wrong with that? No. We're just showing they don't have it all figured out yet. And that means that then younger children don't have the ability to decide which way they want to go in life. That means that Hannah was right to decide he's going to belong to the Lord. And he did. He did belong to the Lord because his mother decided that's what he was going to do. And he was raised that way. He was raised to serve the Lord. And it was right. It was the very right thing to do. And that's what Moses was teaching. It says, you bring them along in this way. Bring and guide the child to maturity in the Lord. Nurture means training. And by implication, it is speaking about disciplinary correction as well. When needed, they are corrected. When needed, they are chastised and brought to the right position within their life. But this is not, give them this bag of biblical and life choices so they can make up their own mind. How many times have you heard someone say, well, that's just not me? I've talked to those who have turned their back on the Lord and on the church, and then they say, well, it's just not me. And I said, that's the reason the Bible teaches repentance. It's not about me. I'm not supposed to be me. I'm supposed to be as much like Christ as I can be. It's not about us finding ourselves. It's about us finding Christ. And that's what we as adults, as parents, as grandparents are doing with and for our children. We're guiding them to Christ rather than leaving them to themselves and bringing shame. Hebrews 12, beginning in verse 5. The writer says, "And you have forgotten the exhortation which speaks to you as sons. My son, do not despise the chastening of the Lord, nor be discouraged when you are rebuked by him. For whom the Lord loves, he chastens, and scourges every son whom he receives. If you endure chastening, God deals with you as with sons. For what son is there whom a father does not chasten?" It says, if you're being corrected, be happy about it. It's for your own good. If you're being corrected, it's because there is one that is concerned about you. That's true spiritually. That's true physically. Correction is for good. But he even points out, correction's not really fun. It's not fun for the one administering the correction. It's not fun for the one receiving the correction. That was another thing one of my sons told me. He says, you never did tell me this is going to hurt me more than it does you. He said, I don't think it ever did hurt you like that. But I knew it was for his good. Did I enjoy it? No. Did it just hurt me because I did it? No, I can't say it hurt me either. Because I knew he needed it. And I could especially remember, and I knew I needed it so many times as well. Spiritually speaking, we need it. And that's what the writer goes on speaking about here in Hebrews, beginning in verse 8 now. But if you are without chastening, of which all have become partakers, then you are illegitimate and not sons. If there's no correction, it says you're not a child. You're not an offspring in there. Furthermore, we have had human fathers who corrected us, and we paid them respect. Shall we not much more readily be in subjection to the Father of spirits and live? For they indeed for a few days chastened us, as seemed best to them, but he for our profit, that we may be partakers of his holiness. Now no chastening seems to be joyful for the present, but grievous. Nevertheless, afterward it yields the peaceable fruit of righteousness to those who have been trained by it. No matter what the training is, it can be gruesome, can't it? It can be hard, but there's a good result. Therefore, strengthen the hands which hang down and the feeble knees, and make straight paths for your feet, so that what is lame may be dislocated, but not be dislocated, but rather be healed. It says we're looking for healing. We're looking for profit, for good things. But it can even be an uncomfortable process. But he's showing us this is what we need. Oh, some will emphasize and push and even threaten their children in sports. I've seen and heard some before just really get on to them for the way they did or did not play basketball. Why weren't you boxing out up there when you're in the right position, but you just stood there and just go on. And yet they'd be the same ones that'd say, don't talk to them about the church. I don't want them to be pushed away. Don't talk to them about the gospel. Seems kind of lopsided, doesn't it? To emphasize spiritual things they think would push them away. To jump on them and chew them out over physical things will make them better. Hard logic. Illogical to me. They knew that harsh training in some things was good, but they didn't want it spiritually. Well, it's not up to the children. That's what we need to remember. It is up to us. We don't let them make up their minds concerning actual health issues. Who enjoys getting a shot? I don't. But you know that it's necessary for some things. We make them do those things for their own health. There are things that we must make them do for their own spiritual health. What do the scriptures say? Jesus says, come to me, all of you. Matthew 11 and verse 28. In Matthew 19 and 14, he says, let the little children come to me. Matthew 6:33, he said, but seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness. In Romans 5, verse 8, it says, but God demonstrates his own love toward us in that while we were sinners, Christ died for us. Mark 16:16, he that believes and is baptized shall be saved. Colossians 3 and verse 1, if then you were raised with Christ, seek those things which are above. 2 Timothy 2, verse 15, be diligent to present yourselves approved to God, a workman who does not need to be ashamed, rightly dividing the word of truth. Matthew 10:38 and 39. He who does not take up his cross and follow after me is not worthy of me. He who finds his life will lose it. He who loses his life for my sake shall find it. Revelation 2 and verse 10, be faithful unto death and I'll give you a crown of life. There's a lot of very plain and direct instruction that we don't just leave there or keep hidden until we think maybe our grown offspring might listen to us or be interested. We start early. As soon as they can listen. If they can listen and learn twinkle, twinkle, they can learn the books of the Bible. They can. Every single one of them in order, better than we know usually. Anything they can learn, then they could be learning scriptures. They can learn who Mary was. They can learn about her son, Jesus. They can learn that he learned. He grew in wisdom and in stature and in favor with both God and man because he was obedient to his parents and to his heavenly Father. They can learn all those things. Well, if Jesus did it, then I need to also. We know that a person reaches an age when they're responsible for their own decisions. We're responsible for their decisions until then. We are. Because that's what God told us to do. You know, toward the very end of the Lord's life, and his earthly life was short. He was younger than a lot of us here in this room. But he started at age 30 and gave hard lessons for 3 years to 12 grown men, pounding things into them. Not asking them what they thought, not letting them be creative in the will of God, but showing and telling them exactly what the Lord's will is, and teaching them who he was while on earth and where he was going when he left. I mean, pounding it. And we think our children will learn it accidentally or by osmosis somehow. No, they won't. But we're told that we are to train, to bring them on. That's even military terms. Very hard, stringent training. We are given children to guide. They're precious. And they are from God, entrusted to us by God. What are we doing with them? Let's make sure that they have the very best spiritually. We always make sure they have the very best we can offer physically. But let's not forget the most important part, to make sure they are brought up in the nurture and admonition of the Lord so that they will make the right decisions. Oh, this in no way covers everything even on this subject. But I hope it helps us who are in the position of teaching that maybe we can focus a little bit more on it. Hope those of you who are young enough to be taught really accept and appreciate the teaching that your parents and others within the congregation are trying to give you and guide you along the way. Those who are going to have children, who have young children, keep God first. Make sure that Jesus is real to your children. Not just a bedtime story, but real. And that'll make all the difference in the world. We'd never close one of the Lord's services like this without offering the invitation. We've even already read some of the passages concerning obedience to the gospel. Don't know that there may be one here. If you understand those things, you can obey it, because you're not obeying what I say. You'd be obeying what the Lord has said in his inspired word. If you're not sure about it, ask questions. Ask someone afterwards. Ask me, ask one of the brethren. Be glad to open the book and let you read it for yourself if you're unsure. If there's a brother or sister that has error in your life, we're here to assist you in that. There's not a one of us who hasn't made a mistake, who hasn't made the wrong turn at one time or another. We know what it's like. We needed help, and if you need help, we're here for you as well. If there be one that we can assist, we invite you to come while we stand and sing.
There's a time of sweet rejoicing.